The following video is a one-person attempt at putting together an APlusLift model HW-8S extra long, extra tall, four-post, two-car garage lift or storage lift. The manual, as can be seen here, doesn't come shipped with the unit, but can easily be found on the APlusLift website. It's minimally informative. And this video is intended to help the user save a bunch of time that I had to spend in looking at drawings and trial and error. In the recommended tool list, you'll see here a number of items that it suggests that you have. So most of these, anybody that's talking about a lift is probably going to have. I would note that a couple items that may not be in the standard toolkit are 18mm sockets and wrench, and 5 to 10mm hex keys. They will be used during the assembly and may be useful to acquire those ahead of time. So, on with the video. I will tackle it from loading from the warehouse to unloading at my garage, disassembling the shipping package, and then installing uprights, installing the Raceway rails, installing the hydraulics, installing the power, and first operation. Hope you enjoy. By the way, I would also recommend going to your local Harbor Freight and acquiring 4 or 5 of these little magnetic trays. They typically come in 2 sizes, are pretty cheap. The prepackaged screws, nuts, bolts, washers, and such are packaged per assembly step for the most part. And so having those out and readily available, but separated into their individual little trays here, ended up being very, very handy. So as you can see here from the warehouse, the shipping rails allow for some space for a forklift to get up under and lift this. However, when you get home and you're going to use a cherry picker, you need to place this on a 4x4 to get a little bit extra height. The initial packaging has been removed, cellophane wrap, cardboard, and that sort of thing, in preparation for disassembling the shipping packaged parts for assembly. The intent is to use a pair of furniture dollies to maneuver the heavy railing, the tire railings, raceways, I guess they're called, and place them where they need to be. The uprights are not supposed to be all that heavy, so they shouldn't need any extra help. I've got a engine lift / cherry picker for doing some of the heavy lifting on the Raceway. Hopefully that's sufficient. I saw that tip in a video from someone else, so thanks for that. I'm trying it with just one lift versus where they had 2, but we'll see how that works. As can be seen here, the way this is packaged is there's a metal end frame, and on the end frame, the bases of 2 of the columns are screwed together in the middle, and then their ends here are screwed to the holes in the base plate and in this metal frame. There is one Raceway on the top, the columns are in the middle, and then the other Raceway is along the bottom. So first order of business will be to remove the bolts that are holding the upper Raceway in place, and that's this bolt here and this bolt here, and then we will try attaching the cherry lift to see how well that works, lifting one end at a time and moving it over to the furniture mover. Each end of the Raceway has 2 bolts with 18mm heads, washer and lock washer. The cherry picker legs are too tall to slide under the lift assembly or packaging. So I need to be able to get to it from the end, but I don't have enough room then once I pick it up to slide it over to the furniture mover. So I'm going to have to try to lift the entire assembly and put it at a bit of an angle where I can then go through and pull the pieces off. So note to anyone else doing this, when you load it into your garage, it would probably be good to load it in at 45 degrees to the walls with some space around them. Solution, since I can't get around the end of the frame and the 2-ton setting on the cherry picker is too short to reach to both ends of the frame, I'm grabbing the end with one bolt into the shipping frame and seeing if I can ease the thing up just enough to be able to slide it around on the floor. Ultimately, what I ended up doing was I took the engine harness mount, as you can see here, with the bolts on that bolted to the shipping frame, mounted that, and lifted it enough to be able to put my furniture dollies up underneath on each end. Now, frankly, when I did this, I was full well expecting it to absolutely crush the dollies, but it didn't, and they roll pretty decent. So that's going to allow me to manipulate and move the whole shipping assembly around to where I can more easily get to the rails to pull them off and then, start disassembling and putting up the uprights. While trying to get this thing situated where I could help the disassembly go a little smoother, it occurred to me that it might be possible to lift the rails off from the center lengthwise. After a little bit of manipulation, I had to lift the shipping container, if you will, up because my engine lift wheels, the legs, were too tall. They're running about 7 inches, and when I had it on the furniture mover, probably only had about 5 inches of clearance, so it wouldn't go under. So I lifted up one end, stacked 3 2x6s, could have been 2x4s, that's just what I had. Lifted up the one end where I got clearance, and I went through and hooked up in the dead center of the length of the rail. Since I don't have my additional furniture casters yet, or movers, I'm just letting the rail sit on the engine lift, as I don't anticipate needing it for anything else until it's ready to place this rail on the upright assembly. Looking at the contents of the rest of the shipping container, we can see here upright and upright. We see a couple of the connecting rails here that go from side to side, the drip pans, and then on the other end, we can see a box full of goodies, which I haven't opened yet. Down here looks like the entrance plate, maybe, ramp. And some miscellaneous tubing and packaging that are down inside. We have the outer wrapping off. You see more clearly now the 2 rails that we have to do the side-to-side connection that the Raceways sit on. Can't really remove anything else yet, though, because first we have to remove the bolts from the base plates, 4 places to the shipping frame, and then one holding the 2 together here, and do that on both ends. Then we'll be able to lift the individual uprights out and start the placement. The box that we saw, when you remove that and open, that is your hydraulic system. So basically the motor and the tank. Note that the bolts are different lengths. You can see here we got different length bolts holding different areas. We got different length spacers. So if you ever had any intention of thinking about sending this thing back, you know, you need to keep up with that. But everything unbolted relatively easy. You need like a 22, 21, and 19-inch wrench. I took mine off with an impact wrench to make it quick and easy. Here's the first rail that has come out. It is sturdy and reasonably heavy, but I was able to lift it off and set it upright without too much trouble. So at this point, we're still talking a one-person setup here on this being possible. You can see most of the uprights have been taken off, working on the last one. Ends up being a little bit easier to take the side-to-side rails off first in order to lift the remaining upright off. Again, if you're doing it by yourself. Make note though, these two side rails are pretty heavy. They're pretty heavy gauge steel apparently. Another thing to show here is, hopefully this shows up, you can see here the stops that are welded in. Inside the two little boxes that were about midway of the one Raceway were 4 little boxes, and these apparently are pulley covers. There's 2 sets. You can see here, one has a slot kind of on the left, the other one has a slot on the right, and then there's 2 pairs of those. With everything removed except the other Raceway, which is inverted in the shipping container. You can see here we've got a couple of welded braces that go from one side to the other. Assumption there would be that helps reduce bending flex. So the last remaining item in the shipping container, if you will, is the jack tray for the bottle jack that you might use in the car. The only pieces left to reduce now, or to remove, are the shipping bolts here and here, and then these 2 rail pieces, one on each end, can be removed, and the other Raceway is ready for assembly. One thing to note, the little tray for the bottle jack is heavy. It's heavier than the ramps, and I haven't put all the materials out from inside the thing, but this is definitely a heavy-duty jack pocket or container. One other thing that occurs to me is that since the Raceway is inverted, it is going to be a whole lot easier to lift it in place if it's already set right side up. So while the frame is still on it, with the sides like they are, I'm going to attempt to go through and flip this. My idea is to end up placing this out of the way, somewhere over here beside the other rail, and putting it on 2 4x4s, and a 2x4 underneath it to get the height. You can see here that this is ever so slightly higher than what the lift is sitting on now with the legs, so that'll give me enough room to be able to get back under it later and lift it up when I'm ready to place. I've got the 4 posts installed. The instructions, which I had indicated earlier, were not in the package, but you can easily find them on site, on their website. But the instructions are all but useless unless you are really looking at them closely. Here's the picture of interest. This is the exploded view diagram. And you can see here the reference that I ended up having to use was right here. This is post or column number 1, opposed by column number 10, of which the item list says there's 2. And it places one here and one diagonally opposite over here. and then there's a single column number 9. So you've got 3 different column types, but the kicker is, here's your reference point. Here's number 10. Here's the other number 10. Here's number 9. And you place them this way, and what you end up with is a placement that looks like this, with the latching mechanisms, mechanical stops, if you will, are on the outside edge of this one. They're on the outside edge here of the base column, we'll call it. This is the column that the power unit, hydraulic unit will sit on and motor. So that's the reference. So this is the front, or what I call the rear, because it's the rear of the garage. This is the rear left. This one's over here is the rear right. And then we come over here, and the only way you can figure out which ways you're supposed to go are by logic. The logic that, okay, if on the other two, which are pretty straightforward, the mechanical locks are on the outer edge, then you set this one here like this, and you set its opposing one also with the locks on the outer edge. And this is how the column numbers work. This column here, which I call my front right, that column is the one odd column in matching. This column here matches that column over there. This is the master column with the tank. And then this over here is the odd one. And so that's where it sits. Interestingly, the manufacturer doesn't pay a whole lot of attention to the pictures that they show in the manual and what they send you. Because you'll notice here the APlusLift symbol is on the outside edge of what I call my front left column. This is the paired number 10 column. In the manual on the front page, that is on the opposite side over there, which doesn't work right. Or we'll find out if it works right or not. But I'm assuming the exploded view is better, more accurate than a random picture that they took and put in the face of the manual. So attention to detail on the part of this manufacturer is pretty low. I found that out actually when I was comparing website information for distances and heights and clearances and stuff like that. They did copy and paste and never made updates. So, you know, beware of that when you're looking at stuff. Check it 3 or 4 different places to see which it has the most consistent numbers. And I'm hoping that an engineering exploded view is the correct answer, as opposed to some marketing person that just was lazy and didn't catch the mistake. Ultimately, I only needed one person to flip the inverted Raceway. I was able to put it down on the furniture pieces, and I essentially tied another strap to the backside middle here and pulled away from it, while at the same time allowing me to grab this edge as I lowered it, and everything come out just fine. So we now have the cherry picker free, both Raceways up where I can get up underneath them with the picker when time comes. We have the 4 posts put in place, and we have the cross member bars set out and taken loose so we can look. Now, what we have here on the edge is we have a sloped edge, which as you're sliding up would do this, go past the mechanical lock, and then snap back under it where it would rest on that lock. So the orientation here then seems correct, that we have that, which then will rest on each one of these mechanical locks as it goes up. On the other side of this is a pulley, which makes sense because all the pulleys are on the inside. The lock release goes on the outside, and then we have a duplicate of this for the other side with the sloped end and the release. What's not clear is we can see where the lock goes. What's not clear is what holds it all in place. Part of the assembly of the cross member is attachment of the bar to the up column. So you can see here, we have the column piece with 2 pins on either side, 2 holes on the top. And we have 8 of these, I'm assuming they're nylon blocks with a slot in them. Slide them over this way, slide them over this way, put the plate on it, and screw them in. Obviously, you put all this inside first and then slide the nylon pieces there. They're then attached using M8. See if I can pull it up here. Using M8 by 25 millimeter screws, flat washers, and split washers, or spring washers as they call them. They're the little hex end, and the assembly will look like this. Okay, we'll try to shoot this from above to where it's able to be seen. We get here and we angle the piece in the side, put in a plate, get it fall in. There it goes. Put our plate in and our 2 screws. And there we have it. Working on manipulating the racetrack that goes to the far side, the outer wall, the one without the cables under it, and pretty much hook this up to the motor contraption, the motor lift. Put 2 straps underneath, hooked front and back, and then adjusted the level so as to make on the lift to make so that the riser was pretty much even across the width. And this is making for a pretty easy movement onto the uprights. I've inserted at this point a video clip showing how to determine the orientation of the 2 rails. You'll notice here these 2 little lips. There's no lip on the outside, but there's 2 lips on the inside, one for the left, one for the right. That's where the jack tray little box sits, and also where your drip tray sits. So you can determine which goes where just based on those lips. And so lining up the end frames, or the Raceway with the cross member, we can see that this hole and this hole and this hole here and this hole matches. If you try to go to the outer hole, there's no hole here to touch. So seemingly the second hole in here is where the alignment should occur. And then that lines up with this hole over here, leaving the outer hole here and the outer hole here for something else. The lip of the Raceway here, laying on top of the cross member, and then it's attached via a bolt on the back side to the 2 holes that were there in the shipping container are now used for connecting to the Raceway. There are end panels, which I'm going to start on next, which are the stops at the end here. Not exactly sure yet what this piece is for, but this goes on to the end using the same holes that are used to actually attach. The other end of the raceway, the entrance way, if you will, has this lip piece. And this piece actually slides into a little slot that we'll see a little bit later to help bracket, the tires of the vehicle from rolling either way off the lift. Another thing to note here is the lip that you see on the Raceway. You'll notice here in this picture, it's a sharp little lip there, about an inch or so. On the one that I've already placed, there's also that lip. Both of those lips face in towards each other and provide the mechanism for the jack tray to slide and for the drip trays to hang on to. So that's how you determine your orientation for putting the Raceway up onto the column uprights and cross member. In particular, related to connecting the Raceway to the cross member, there is this, I think it's a 90mm bolt that goes through to the ends, as you can see here. The end plate was attached with no issue on the front side of the car. See the two bolts and the plate. Got reasonable number of threads coming off the back side, which is what you want. However, the rear side of the car connection, where the ramp goes, is a little more problematic. As near as I can determine, the piece that I saw here with the bushings or the spacers on it are put in place. And so the idea there is that leaves a slot for the slot on the ramp here that we see right there. That slot would fall into the slot provided here with these spacers. And then once you get the car in place, you take this part and it sets in there to keep the car from inadvertently rolling backwards. That's the idea so far. No idea what the hole is for, because it does not extrude or extend below the point here where you could like lock it in place. So not 100% sure that's correct yet, but from the pictures and everything, that looks correct. Problem is, when they added these spacers, somebody didn't think that through. Right here, we've got the washer, the lock washer, the flat washer, lock washer, and the bolt, but there's no threads past the end. Now, it's not completely tightened up yet, but I mean, I can't even feel the end of the bolt from the back side of the thread there. This is wrong. General rule of thumb is that you should have 2 or 3 threads once, finished for integrity. So this thing is a 90mm long bolt, and it probably should be 95 or 100. So I'll be getting replacement bolts for the back end of the Raceway to connection to the cross members. The front seemed to be fine, plenty there, but the back's ill-engineered, and that's what the part list calls for. So it's not like somebody packed it wrong. It was just engineered incorrectly. Or there is a possibility that I'm doing it wrong. But it all at least seems to follow and make sense from the pictures and the number of materials that they're giving. Okay, so I have gotten the second or primary rail installed using the lift, using the engine hoist, cherry picker, And at this point, all the heavy lifting, literally, is completed. All of this has been done with the use of nothing more than this engine hoist and one person. I've spent about maybe 12, 14 hours so far getting to this point, but a good portion of that was just figuring out where stuff goes. So hopefully, if you're viewing this video, that will save you a lot of time, and at the same time shows that this can be done with one person if need be. Now, I'd be the first to acknowledge it's always better to have a second person, and always better to go with safety. In my case, I wanted to do a video showing that it could be done, and so here this video is. I will note here that as I've got this thing up, I had said initially earlier that the cross rails are put onto the first latching mechanism. All right, so hopefully that shows up. They are all latched onto the first mechanism. But since I'm going to be crawling under this thing now, a little extra support in the way of these 4x4s that I'd use, I've put under the middle of each Raceway, front and rear. You can see back there. And these are 24 inches, an 8-foot long 4x4 cut in 4 2-foot sections are perfect. And these are placed underneath the middle of the Raceways so that if anything strange were to happen, those will at least brace the fall. It might still topple, but that will at least hopefully give me enough time to get out of the way if something happens. So working underneath, we can see now the cables. Looking here at the front end, the front of the car in, we see cables coming down, coming all the way down to the far end. So they're unclear about how the cables are supposed to come off. The wording seems to be some sort of goofy Chinese translation that makes almost no sense. But using logic here, I am taking the cables loose from the tie wrap, pulling, in this case, this end through, and then it's on the pulley here, and I will route it through this slot here, coming over to the other rail, out, and to the associated pulley there, which ultimately would go up to the top column. Same sort of thing on the other end. The cables that seem to be the closest are the ones that make the most sense. There's this other cable here, really short, which using this logic should go out this side, which would be the front left corner, up that pulley, and then up to the top. And then there's a similar one down on the other end. Having to wait for a callback from technical support at APlusLifts. In the meantime, I am putting on the casters for the moving of the lift once you get it all installed. See here, we've got one caster. We've got 4 bolts. These are the kind of hex cap bolts that we have. One observation after having put a second one of these together is it's best to put the cap bolt on, or the screw, on the wheel side, because, and then put the washers and nuts on the back. If you do it the other way around, like I did the first time, this way, the washers ever so slightly interfere with the rotating part of the wheel. So I think that would be a better approach. So got off the phone with tech support, and their suggestion was that in some cases the hydraulic piston is somewhat stuck and needs to be pulled. And their suggestion was to do it with a come-along. So what I have done was I have taken a strap that I've been using, wrapped it around the plates here. Can't see what I'm pointing at. Here we go. Wrapped around the plates. Try to get a better view of it here. That are connected to the piston. Connecting that to a come-along. And then on the other end, wrapping it around the opening in the railing Raceway to connect back into the come-along. My straps and come-along were just a little short, so I was lacking maybe 2 inches being able to get it to hook. So I'm jury rigging with a pair of vice grips to hold the clamps together, hoping that that's strong enough to free up this hydraulic pump or hydraulic piston. Okay, so initial install has been done of all the cables. This is starting from the vehicle left rear, going up the cable, using the innermost hole of the 2 at the top. And forgive me a second. I'm actually standing on the rails now because they're supposed to hold a car. Makes for a perfect height for being able to do the final adjustments on the cables. But you can see here we have washer, nut, second nut. Now the second nut hasn't been done yet because I need to let the spring stretch just a bit. Put a little bit more tension on them. They say it's supposed to be like the tension of a fan belt when you get through. So there's plenty of threads here to be able to pull that up. But I wanted to get a reasonable amount of stretch on the cables first. We've got all 4 of them put in. And we're going to let that sit for, I don't know, probably an hour or 2 while I go to lunch today and come back. So we've gotten all 4 cables tightened up. In my case, they actually pulled all the way up to the base of the threaded part of the cable. And that's gotten them reasonably taut. But that's all we can go, so that's fine, all on the pulleys. To finish the action, you put the second bolt on and then push them in opposite directions like it's being shown here. That locks the top bolt to the bottom bolt, keeps it from becoming undone. I'll go through a run through underneath so you can see how everything runs. Here's the tip of the piston. And we're running down the piston here towards the left rear end of the car. Here's the stops where the cables connect. Okay, now here's where all the fun begins. The top cable here runs on the top pulley, runs back up all the way down, runs through the pulley down here, runs across and up to the tie point. The pulley on the bottom goes around and connects through here, goes across, goes through a pulley that's on the other side of the Raceway and up to the top. So these 2 pulleys then go to the vehicle passenger side. The other 2, similarly, the one on the top goes all the way to the front left. The one on the bottom goes through the pulley and then up to the top, which is the driver's left rear side column. Next task to tackle is hooking up the hydraulics. Here on the unit, we can see on the bottom is a screw point for emptying out the tank as needed and required. We see here at the blue cap that we have to take that cap off, remove the shipping nut, and replace it with the packaged nut that comes in there. That then allows us to connect the cable up to the unit and then down to the ramp. Underneath the ramp, in my case, the connector was flipped backwards, so you have to flip that around, bolt it down, and then use this cable to go from the pump to the ramp assembly. Next, the pulley and cable covers were put in place. There's 4 of them, one for each post. Pretty straightforward. There's a little cutout here, 2 different types of covers. Put the cutout where the cable is, and into hex key nuts tied into the frame. And again, 4 places, 2 different types. The next step is the lock release. And the idea is that you get this installed where the whole assembly is like this, and you can either pull or push. Since you're going to be over here, doing the release, it makes sense to have it oriented to where you can pull it with one hand while pushing this handle with the other, while you're standing right there to let it down. But this connects through. It's threaded on the end. Show you that in a second. It comes with a loose spacer, which is not immediately obvious what you do with that until you start assembling it. And this just provides an ideal spacing point between the front and the back, or the back side of the angle here, bracket, and the end of the cross member. Underneath, we have that connects into this black rod that runs the length of the Raceway to the other end. The end of it is a welded nut that's black. The handle comes with a nut along with that sleeve attached. Take the nut off, slide it through the hole, and then redo the nut as far back as it'll go. And then you twist the handle to thread this thing into this long shaft, right? And you have to simultaneously, or at least in concert with that, go to the other end of the Raceway and do the same thing with the other release bracket. And what you're looking for when you get through is to have both ends of this to be loose, but still not able to be, a lot of a play back and forth. Connections have been made to the brake release. What I ended up doing, what seemed to work the best, was I first went through and connected the bolts, 4, washer on both sides this time. Washer here, lock washer nut. I did mine with the bolt in and the other side coming out so as to minimize hitting on this bolt. And what I did was I used the length options already provided on the unit. These are a locking nut, and then this head will spin, allowing you some variability in the length, and that's on all 4 pieces, these 2 and the 2 on the other end. So I basically put it together like it was. That seemed to be a nice angle on the handle for being able to then pull that and pull this handle here, when you're letting down the lid. So I did that. That's all tightened. There was a nut that I had shown previously underneath. I tightened it at that angle and then went down to the other end and made the appropriate adjustments there for the final connection. So same thing here, nut, washer, the bracket, and then washer, lock, washer, nut. I did have to play around here some. I had to spin off or spin out the eye brackets, and I also had to change the angle of this guy here to where I had it. I had to move it more from this angle counterclockwise. So I had to go underneath, loosen the tightening nut on that rod assembly, shift it around, screw all this together where it was tight and not binding, then go back in and tighten the nut up underneath. So now it's all nice and tight. I still got to tighten these up and lock them down. But this now seems like the proper orientation for maximum ease of use when, holding this handle, pulling this, and having all four of the releases released at the same time. On to the electrical connection. You'll be able to see here that there's a very short stub. Lots of people have commented on this. And it is mostly useless other than to put a connector on it. And that's not my first thought, but I didn't want to go into the box and do some rewiring, likely voids of warranty, all those kind of bad things. So ultimately I did go through and put a locking 110 volt connector and then plug onto this, running it over a wire to the electrical outlet. One other thing to note here is that the hydraulic fluid container in the instructions say it takes 3 to 5 gallons. I bought 5 just to be safe, although yeah, it definitely didn't look like that. It takes just a hair less than 3 gallons on this particular model to get it right here, where the edge is. That still shows a little high on the little dipstick that's supplied, but it should be fine. I'll watch it the first couple of times to make sure it's not overfilling on lowering. First test of the lift worked just fine. The rate, it takes a few seconds, maybe as many as 30, for the tank to load the hydraulic fluid into the piston before it will start moving up. It was drained down to probably, I don't know, here or so before anything actually started happening. Consider that priming the hydraulic pump maybe. Went all the way up to the top with no problem. When it comes down with no weight on it, I'm assuming that's why this is, it kind of pulsates coming down. It's like choo, 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 choo. I'll shoot that a little bit later, how that works. But the thing I wanted to make note of is, since I installed this thing with it being put on the first stop, and then I tightened the cables appropriately for that, it now won't go all the way to the bottom. It's missing, I don't know, maybe as much as 6 inches. So I've got to lift it back up to that first safety stop, go back on top, loosen all the nuts and the bolts about the same amount so that it pulls equally, and then let it get all the way to the bottom, and then tighten the cables. They don't really elaborate on that in the manual, but that they definitely say it's supposed to be taut and it's supposed to go all the way to the ground. So that's a logical conclusion. One other thing to note, as you've gone up all the way to the top the first time, when you get somewhere down about this first stop, the bottle will gurgle like crazy. And this is presumably the air being purged out of the system, when it goes back down. And you're supposed to do this, I think, 2 additional times from what I've done here. So that'll go through a purging process. And in the manual also talks about purging once you have a car on it too, to lift it up all the way to the top, and I think down to the bottom to purge it. So that's where we're at. We do have a working system now. Just have to do the permanent wiring as opposed to this test wiring that I have here, and just the cables, and we are good to go. For those that are curious, when everything is fully up, the piston is fully pulled in, and it's fully pulled out when everything's down. So you can see here maybe a little bit better some of the cable routing and such that's been done previously. Here again is I forget what the plate is that they call that, but this is the plate where the crimped ends are caught on the cables. And then there's the hydraulics where it ties in. And then this hydraulic tube is every bit of 6 feet long. I hadn't measured it, but it's taller than I am, or longer than I am tall. So it's pretty good size. So for those that care, on position 12 was where I had the thing before. It's about 7 or 8 inches head clearance. I'm just under 6 foot. I skipped position 11 and stopped on 10, and I just barely scraped my head when I'm going under certain parts of the lift. So somewhere at position 10 or 11, depending on your height, would be ideal walking under height without busting your head every time you go under. The last item is the casters. The casters attach to the hole here. They go backwards, and the backside slides under this little L-shaped, upside down L-shaped bracket that's welded to the frame. One on the front and one on the back. And so you do that all 4 places, and when the lift goes down, it pushes against this, and it lifts the column up off the ground. You can see there, it's maybe 1 inch, and it's actually relatively easy to move at that point. One hand, you could move it, slide it around wherever you needed to. The intent here, I guess, is twofold. If you're in a garage a big garage, where you're always needing to readjust, where you needed a car lifted up and that kind of thing, working on it or whatever, this is a good deal, or I imagine it is. Unfortunately, when you lift it up, the casters, that whole assembly is sort of kind of in the way. So for your average user that's just looking to stack a car or work on a car and everything being in place, I would recommend getting it where you want it and then taking the casters off and then putting them somewhere out of the way. When putting these on, I also noted something else. I was constantly having to go over to the power unit and lift the ramps, the rails, because if it's not resting on one of the mechanical stops, this thing slowly goes down. And I mean slowly, as it might go from a foot to ground level in 30 seconds. So don't ever put your car up on this thing and not have it locked in a mechanical stop. It will come down on you, albeit, or it will come down and crush the car that's underneath it, which would be bad. So the other thing I noticed is before I put the casters on, I had the lift all the way up at the top, and it was reasonably stable, but it did wiggle. I mean, it moved with the lift all the way up to notch number 12. You could grab the column upright, and this thing would move forward, backward, sideways, and such. Now, that might be minimized with a car on it, but even though they say nothing about it in the manual, nothing about it online that I've seen, these base plates have 4 holes in them. And for no bigger than that base plate is, give me a second and I'll measure it, see how it compares to industry norms here. This base plate is 11.5 inches, I'm assuming both directions. Yep, 11.5 inches in both directions, which I think is pretty much industry norm. So once you get this thing in place where you want it in your garage, I would highly recommend getting some concrete captive bolts type system to bolt this thing down to the floor, just to be extra safe that these things don't waddle. I guess alternatively, if you were really ingenious, there's an extra hole. Sorry for the light that way, you saw it just then. There's an extra hole right here, and in each one of the columns there's an extra hole. One could be ingenious and run wood or metal side to side, front to back, creating a rectangle across the top, and that would add some rigidity. But I strongly suspect that it's both cheaper and better to attach it simply to the floor. Okay, well, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this little video clip. Hopefully, it saved you some time, and that's the intent. And enjoy your lift.